I was walking toward the family table at my dad's anniversary party when my sister stepped in front of me, still smiling for the guests around her. She leaned in close, pretending to fix her hair, and whispered, "Don't embarrass yourself tonight. Stay quiet, and don't make this about you." Her tone was sweet enough for everyone else to miss it, but sharp enough to hit me straight in the chest. I froze for a moment, surrounded by laughing relatives, music, and clinking glasses, yet completely alone in that second. My mother looked away. My father was too busy greeting guests to notice what she said. Danica kept walking, as if her words meant nothing. But tonight, I wasn't the version of myself she thought she could push around. I had something with me that none of them knew about. Something that would turn the entire room once it came out. I took my place in the corner of the room, letting the noise settle around me, and waited for the moment she feared most. She had no idea what I brought with me, or how quickly her confidence would break when the truth surfaced. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. My name is Taryn Locke, and I have spent most of my life standing in my sister's shadow. Danica has always been the one the family looks toward first. She speaks louder, dresses sharper, and never misses a chance to remind people she is the successful one. My mother feeds that image, praising her in front of every relative. My father loves us both, but he avoids conflict so much that his silence often feels like agreement. I learned early that if Danica wanted something, no one stopped her from taking it. That included attention, credit, and space that didn't belong only to her. And whenever she felt threatened, she aimed her confidence like a weapon. Tonight was no different. This anniversary party was meant to celebrate my parents' 30 years together. The country club was decorated with soft lights, framed photos of them through the years, and all the people who mattered most to them. I arrived early, hoping to help with the setup, but Danica quickly stepped in and took control of everything. She waved me away from the gift table, told me not to touch the decorations, and made sure I stood behind her in every group photo. "Smile smaller," she whispered once. "You look tense." Every comment had a purpose. Every instruction had a sting. What she didn't know was that while she focused on appearances, I had been focusing on my father. I had spent months handling things he didn't want to burden the family with. I was the one who helped him manage his important paperwork. I was the one who sat with him during long appointments. And I was the one who found the letters he wrote about us. Letters where he said he was proud of me. Letters where he admitted regret for letting Danica's behavior go unchecked. Letters he never meant for my sister to see. I didn't plan to reveal any of it tonight. I wanted to give them a quiet celebration, but Danica's comments kept cutting deeper, and her arrogance made something inside me shift. Harlan Pierce, my father's closest friend, found me near the back of the room and whispered, "Did you bring the folder?" I nodded. He nodded back, as if confirming a decision he already knew I made. When the time comes, don't hold back. The night continued with Danica taking the lead in every conversation. She introduced herself before introducing my parents. She bragged about her achievements during a toast that wasn't even hers to give, and every time she spoke, she made sure I stood just a little behind her, a little smaller, a little quieter. But she didn't understand something important. She wasn't the one holding the truth tonight. I was. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. As the evening carried on, the tension in the room began to thicken in a way only family gatherings can create, where old wounds hide beneath polite smiles, and every conversation feels like a test you didn't agree to take. I stood near the edge of the room watching guests mingle, watching Danica glide through the crowd like she owned the place, placing her hand on shoulders, giving dramatic laughs, making sure everyone could see her. She thrived in settings where she could perform. She loved attention because it was the only way she knew how to feel important. I watched her speak to our aunts, comparing her recent promotion to the accomplishments I had worked twice as hard for. She made a show of presenting gifts to our parents, loudly explaining how much effort she put into everything. When one of the cousins asked her where I was, she didn't even look around before saying, "Probably standing somewhere awkward. You know how she gets at events." A few of them chuckled, not because it was funny, But because Danica's confidence convinced them they were supposed to laugh, I felt the sting in my chest, but I refused to let it pull me back into the smaller version of myself she expected. My mother floated around the room, occasionally glancing at me with that tense smile she used whenever she worried I might disrupt the picture-perfect atmosphere. My father was happily talking to old friends, unaware of the undercurrent running beneath the celebration. I didn't blame him for missing it. He had spent years pretending Danica's behavior was a personality quirk rather than a problem. That habit had allowed her to grow bold enough to whisper the things she said to me tonight. It also allowed her to believe she was untouchable. But the sealed folder in my bag told a different story. The truth inside it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, personal, and real. And that was exactly why it held more power than anything Danica had ever bragged about. The conflict began to peak when Danica took control of the gift table. She stood next to it, as if she had been assigned the role, asking guests if they wanted her to place their gifts in the proper order. Every time someone brought something over, she would loudly describe what she thought it might be, or how some people tended to buy sentimental gifts because they didn't have much else to offer. Her eyes flicked toward me each time, daring me to react, daring me to defend myself. I didn't. Not yet. I simply watched her stack boxes and bags while my own small, neatly wrapped gift sat at the end of the table untouched. Eventually, she picked it up and said loudly, "This is from Taryn, probably something emotional or homemade." She smirked, put it back down, and whispered to our cousin, "She always tries too hard." She wanted me to hear it. She wanted everyone around her to hear it. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. They weren't blind. They saw how she treated me, even if they never said anything about it. Harlan Pierce noticed too. He stepped beside me and muttered, "She's pushing because she knows you won't push back." He glanced at the bag slung over my shoulder. "But she has no idea what you're carrying." His words were simple, but they grounded me. I had come into this night wanting peace, but peace wasn't what Danica wanted. She wanted dominance, and she wanted an audience for it. The conflict escalated further when it was time for the first round of speeches. The plan was simple. My father would open the night with a welcome message. Then family members could speak if they wanted. But Danica rushed to the microphone before anyone else could move. She started talking about family unity, values, and legacy, acting as if she were co-hosting the entire celebration. Half the room listened politely, but the other half exchanged glances, recognizing how self-centered her speech was becoming. Then she shifted toward me. "Some of us," she said with a pointed smile, "had to grow up quickly and learn how to carry responsibility. Others take longer to catch up." Guests murmured under their breath. She kept going, adding jab after jab hidden behind a sugary tone, pretending it was harmless. "But tonight, let's hope everyone stays calm and doesn't make this event about themselves." That line wasn't subtle. It was a direct attack. People looked toward me, waiting to see how I'd react. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I let her finish her overpolished performance. Because the more she spoke, the clearer the contrast would be once the truth came out. She wanted the room to see me as fragile, awkward, unimportant. She wanted them to see her as the shining daughter. But every word she said only proved how deeply she feared losing the spotlight. The conflict wasn't just her cruelty. It was the entire family dynamic pressing down on me, demanding silence while rewarding arrogance. But I wasn't here to stay silent anymore. I rested my hand on the folder in my bag. I knew the moment to step forward was getting close, and when it came, she would finally understand she wasn't the one controlling the night. Not anymore. As Danica stepped away from the microphone, her practiced smile perfectly in place for the applause she expected but barely received, something inside me hardened into a calm I had never felt before. It was the kind of calm that comes right before a storm breaks open, when the air shifts and you know change is not only possible, it is necessary. I watched her walk back to the center of the room like she owned it, greeting relatives who now looked more uneasy than impressed. Her speech had revealed more than she intended. It had exposed her insecurity, her hunger for control, her willingness to humiliate me for approval. My father moved toward the microphone next, but he hesitated at the stairs, gripping the rail for a moment longer than usual. He looked tired, overwhelmed, and unexpectedly emotional. The crowd sensed it. Murmurs spread. My mother rushed to his side, her hand on his back, whispering that everything was fine, but he shook his head slightly. Something was weighing on him, something much deeper than nerves. I stepped forward quietly, instinctively, ready to help him if he needed it. But before I reached him, Danica appeared again, placing a firm hand on his arm as if she were the gatekeeper to his own anniversary. "Dad, I'll take it from here," she said, forcing another smile. "You just relax. I can handle the event." The room fell silent, stunned by her audacity. My father gently pulled his arm away, his voice soft but steady. "I want to speak," he said. Danica's smile cracked for the first time. She backed away reluctantly, but not without shooting me a sharp look, the kind that warned me to stay exactly where she wanted me, silent and small. My father began speaking, but his voice wavered. He thanked everyone for coming, talked about love and family, then paused as if a thought had hit him too hard to push through. He blinked several times, struggling to continue. A wave of concern rippled through the room. I stepped closer again, and this time he looked directly at me. "Taryn," he said quietly, "could you come here for a moment?" Danica's head snapped toward him so quickly it almost looked painful. The crowd parted as I walked up to the stage, and for the first time that night, all eyes were on me without mockery, without judgment, without Danica standing in front of me. My father handed me a small note card he had prepared, but his hand shook. "I forgot some things," he whispered. "You know them better." And just like that, he gave me permission to step into a space he had never opened for me before, a space Danica believed belonged only to her. I felt the weight of the room shift as I tucked the note card away and placed my hand on the edge of the podium. The folder in my bag felt heavier, like it was pulsing with every truth it held, urging me forward. Behind me, I heard Danica hiss under her breath. "Do not take the microphone. You'll ruin everything." She said it with a forced smile, pretending to adjust my dress strap as guests watched. Her voice trembled with fear, not confidence. That fear told me everything. She knew she couldn't control the night anymore. She knew the spotlight she clung to so desperately was slipping from her hands. I stood tall, ignoring her warning. My father nodded again, silently telling me it was my turn. For the first time in years, I didn't hesitate. I reached into my bag and pulled out the sealed folder. The moment it appeared, Harlan Pierce straightened in his seat with recognition. My mother paled. Danica's eyes widened, her lips parting in a silent gasp she tried to hide by turning away. She knew the folder. She had seen it once by accident during an argument between my father and her years ago. She didn't know what was inside, but she knew it was something she never wanted revealed. I stepped to the microphone and said, "Dad asked me to share something tonight." My voice was steady, not loud, not shaky, just controlled. The room fell completely still. Danica took a step forward as if to stop me, but Clark grabbed her arm subtly, trying to keep her from making a bigger scene. She pulled away, panic flashing across her face. That was the moment I realized the truth held more power than any insult she had ever thrown at me. This wasn't about revenge. This was about clarity, about exposing what had been hidden for too long, about finally speaking without fear. I opened the folder. That single motion changed everything. The moment the folder opened, the room leaned in without meaning to, as if every person in the hall sensed something important was about to surface. I felt the air tighten around me, not in fear, but in clarity. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to Danica. I was simply allowing the truth to stand where it always should have. I pulled out the first documents, the ones showing how I had been handling my father's medical decisions for the past year, attending his appointments, speaking with specialists, managing the paperwork he was too overwhelmed to sort through. I explained how he trusted me with this responsibility because I never made it about attention or image. I made it about him. Gasps moved through the room as I detailed the nights I drove him to urgent care, the mornings I woke up early to help him navigate insurance calls, the evenings I sat with him while he processed news he wasn't ready to tell the rest of the family. My mother pressed her hand over her mouth. My father lowered his head, not in shame, but in gratitude he had never said aloud. Then I held up the foreclosure notice. The room froze completely. I explained how, months ago, our family home had been at risk after Dad's temporary loss of income and an unexpected medical expense. I was the one who negotiated with the bank, filed the appeals, and saved the house. Not Danica, not Clark, not anyone who claimed to be the responsible one. I did it quietly while everyone else assumed my life was insignificant. Danica stumbled back a step, shaking her head as if the truth itself offended her. "That's not possible," she muttered. But the evidence was in my hand, and the bank officer's signature was clear. Before she could regain her false confidence, I took out the letters. The room softened immediately. These were my father's handwritten notes, the ones I found tucked in an old box when organizing his documents. Letters he wrote, but never sent. Letters where he wrote that he feared he didn't show me enough appreciation, that I was stronger than I believed, that he admired my quiet resilience. I read a short line aloud. "Taryn carries burdens no one sees, but she does it with a strength I wish I had." My father's eyes filled with tears. Guests looked at him, then at me, then back at Danica, realizing the contrast between the child he acknowledged and the one who demanded admiration. Danica's expression cracked again, confusion mixing with something darker, something like jealousy she could no longer hide. She tried to regain control, stepping forward with a forced laugh. "Okay, we get it, you're dramatic. You always make things bigger than they are. This is supposed to be a celebration." But her voice wavered. She wasn't convincing anyone, not even herself. Then came the final blow. I lifted the financial logs, the ones showing she had secretly withdrawn money from the family account years ago, money my father had set aside for emergencies. The logs showed she spent it on luxury items, vacations, and image-building expenses she claimed were investments in her future. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't raise my voice. I simply presented the facts, dates, amounts, signatures. The room erupted in quiet shock. Guests whispered, some openly staring at Danica as if seeing her for the first time. Clark looked away sharply, embarrassed to be associated with her now that the facade had collapsed. My mother stepped toward Danica, whispering something too soft for anyone else to hear, but the shame on her face said enough. My father raised his hand, stopping Danica from speaking again. His voice carried more weight than it ever had. "This night was never yours to control," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "You tried to humiliate your sister, but you only exposed yourself." Danica's mouth dropped open, a silent plea forming before she swallowed it back. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I stood tall and steady, letting the truth take up the space I had always been denied. The applause that followed wasn't loud or theatrical. It was soft but honest, a ripple of acknowledgement that shook Danica far more than anything I said. She backed away, unable to keep her perfect posture. Her confidence shattered piece by piece as the room turned toward me with recognition and toward her with disappointment. It wasn't revenge delivered through cruelty. It was revenge delivered through truth, and that truth hit harder than any insult she had ever thrown at me. When the applause faded into a heavy, thoughtful quiet, the entire room shifted its attention from me to Danica, and for the first time in my life, I saw her without the shield of charm she had always used to protect herself. She stood near the edge of the stage, shoulders trembling, eyes darting between relatives who had spent years praising her. Now those same relatives looked at her with confusion, disappointment, and a level of judgment she never believed would be directed at her. I watched her try to gather herself, smoothing her dress, straightening her necklace, attempting to rebuild the image she had lived behind for so long. But the cracks were too deep. The truth had already settled into the room. There was no going back. My mother approached her first, not with warmth, but with a quiet, stunned expression that told me she didn't know how to defend her anymore. She had always justified Danica's behavior as ambition or personality, but tonight she saw what everyone else finally saw: cruelty disguised as confidence. In contrast, relatives who barely spoke to me before now approached with gentle nods, soft compliments, and a kind of respect I had never been offered. They weren't praising me for exposing her. They were acknowledging what I had carried alone for years. My father remained near the microphone, looking both heartbroken and relieved, as if he had been waiting a long time for someone to open a door he never had the courage to unlock. When he stepped down from the stage, he walked directly to me and pulled me into a long, steady embrace. His voice was quiet but full of weight when he said, "I should have seen all of this sooner. I'm proud of you, Taryn. More than you know." I felt something inside me loosen, something I had held tight for years without realizing it. Validation didn't heal every wound, but it allowed air to reach places that had been suffocating. My mother approached next, offering a hesitant smile. She wasn't ready to apologize fully, but the look in her eyes showed she understood her role in the family dynamic, and that recognition alone felt like a step forward. Danica, on the other hand, remained frozen. Her mask had fallen, and she didn't know how to move without it. Clark whispered something to her, trying to encourage her to leave before she broke down completely, but she pulled away from him, shaking her head. It wasn't sadness. It was disbelief that the world she built around her superiority had crumbled in front of an audience she had always tried to impress. Eventually, she turned toward me, her voice barely holding together as she said, "Why would you do this to me?" Her question wasn't an apology. It was an accusation, a refusal to accept responsibility. I held her gaze and answered simply, "I didn't do anything to you. I told the truth." She looked away, unable to argue because deep down she knew it was true. The silence that followed wasn't painful. It was freeing. I didn't owe her comfort or explanations. I didn't owe her the version of myself she preferred, the quiet shadow that made her shine brighter. Tonight proved that truth stands on its own, even when lies scream louder. As the evening wound down, guests gathered their coats and hugged my parents goodbye, but for the first time ever, they approached me before leaving. One aunt pressed my hand and whispered, "You deserved to be heard." An uncle told me, "You handled yourself with grace." They weren't empty compliments. They were acknowledgments that the quiet daughter they overlooked was not weak. She was steady. She was capable. She was done being silent. When the hall finally emptied, my father rested his hand on my shoulder and said, "This family needed honesty. You gave us that." And for the first time, I believed him. The night ended not in chaos but in clarity, with Danica realizing that deception can only cover up truth temporarily. She had built her confidence on the assumption that she would never be challenged, and tonight shattered that illusion. As I walked out of the venue into the cool night air, I felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't win anything tonight. I reclaimed something that had always been mine, my voice, my dignity, and my place in the family. And the best part was knowing I didn't need applause, forgiveness, or approval. The truth was enough. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from.